with Dr. Kate. Today I am with Heather Simpson. She's the founder and director of Hands on Nature, a nonprofit organization in Berlin which provides programs for children to directly be able to experience and explore the natural world. So I'm very excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure.
I wanted to start actually with a quote from a book I'm in the process of reading,
Yes.
which the more I read this book, the more excited I was for you to be here.
Yeah.
So then this is by Richard Louv. Am I saying his
Richard
name
Louv.
right? Richard Louv.
Yeah.
It's called Last Child in the Woods, which is an excellent book. And right at the beginning, he says, within the space of a few decades, the way children understand and experience nature has changed radically. Today, kids are more aware of the global threats to the environment, but their physical contact, their intimacy with nature is fading. That's exactly the opposite of how it was when I was a child. It's probably, I'm about halfway through the book, and it's the couple lines that has stuck out.
Yeah.
I can't forget that one small part.
Yes.
And I feel like that's a lot of what Hands on Nature is about.
Right. Actually, yes.
And the basis.
Yes, and it's funny that you brought that book up because that actually is what sort of inspired me to move forward with the organization, because I was reading that at the same time that I was getting my naturalist training.
Yes.
And I was reading that, and a lot of what you've read probably is that he says that like when we were young, we would be out, school would end at 3 and we'd be outside, right, until dinner, and then parents would ring the bell. They would never know where you were, and you would just be exploring and getting dirty and getting muddy, and at 6 or whatever, the bell would ring and you'd come in and have dinner. But it has changed so much. And he says, as you've read probably, that now they're book smart children, and they can tell you anything about the rainforest on the other part of the world, and they can tell you about detailed facts about animals and plants, but they can't tell you like what the dirt smells like under their nails, or what it's like to walk barefoot in the grass even, And as I was reading that, my son at that time was probably 5, and he had his friends over, and we're fortunate enough to have woods behind our house, 100 acres, and we were going for a walk, and this one child said, "Oh, this reminds me of a video game I have," was the first thing he said. And then, I know, and then he goes, and then there was this beautiful tree that had fallen, and he said, "Can I climb that?" And like he was asking permission, and I'm like, "Oh, absolutely, you can climb that." And I didn't realize like how bad it had gotten in that one generation until I was seeing that firsthand, And so I decided to just put out a couple classes and sort of offer after school things at first for children, and it filled up so fast I couldn't meet the demands, And still I find that there's children, 7 and 8 years old who had never held an earthworm before, or who say, my favorite part about an earthworm is when it changes into a butterfly. Like their information, they just don't have that hands-on contact. And boys, girls, both of them who have never held frogs before, or who don't want to get their feet dirty, don't want to walk in the outside barefoot anymore. And there's just sort of a fear of nature more, and all the time that they're spending indoors, the statistics now are something like 7 to 10 hours a day. They're plugged into computers, TV, video games, screens in general, 7 to 10 hours, compared to 7 minutes outside.
Wow. Isn't that incredible? I mean, there's so many things that you talked about that I want to talk about, which is the fear.
Yeah, the fear.
But also, I think that you were mentioning a lot of kids are indoors.
Yes.
They're in front of screens.
Yes.
Which the statistics are incredible.
Yes.
And one of the biggest problems with that which is not really a secret, is obesity and a sedentary lifestyle.
Indeed.
So the way that we're coming up with help and alternatives for this is we're encouraging sports, and we're encouraging them to get out and do recreation camps, which are wonderful because they're not sitting.
Yes.
And he talks about this too, and I'm thinking this as you're saying this, there's such a difference between structured and unstructured exploration, really, and what that does for a developing, growing mind.
Right, absolutely. And that's a lot of what I find too, is that I can, some of the our programs are planned activities, like we're going to start here and walk to this place and look for things along the way. But the unstructured stuff, which I try to leave time for too, is just, running and climbing to the trees and jumping off rocks and checking out puddles and jumping through meadows and stuff. All that unstructured playtimes, they don't get that anymore at all.
And they don't know how to do it.
They don't know how to do it, right. And they are afraid of getting cut and hurt, and even they don't, it's just fascinating. And walking, one thing that I find interesting too is they're unsure of themselves walking outside now. So they're used to walking indoors on a concrete floor or on a rug. So the tree roots and rocks, the kids trip now all the time.
Oh my gosh, isn't that interesting?
Fascinating. So they're not used to a surface that's uneven.
Yeah.
So a lot of kids will be walking, I'll just look and they'll be like, they'll all be sort of down from actually flat out tripping because they're not used to a surface that's not even.
So I know he talked about it too, is he could close his eyes and picture his, the worn out path to his spots in the woods, or that's just not
happening.
Children aren't getting that experience anymore.
Yeah.
There's such a difference between reading it and being aware of the problems that we're facing as global threats in our environment, but it's another whole other experience to actually be out there and feel it and touch it.
Absolutely, yes.
Understand it.
And a lot of them have these concerns about, endangered animals and these huge problems that are so big and so hard to solve, but they feel so powerless because they can't do much about it. But what scares me is that if they're not getting out there and, getting dirty and falling in love with their secret spots or their favorite places, then, they won't have an investment really to want to preserve it because it's not special to them. So I'm trying to, teach that love of the outdoor places so that they have an investment in protecting them.
Connect.
And connecting to them, yeah.
What do you see when the children, I'd like to get your input because I know you're so great with the kids and, especially when they show up. My kids have gone to Hands on Nature and they're going again this summer, and your programs, your longer day programs filled up in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
And wonderful.
Thanks. Yeah.
What do you see when kids are out in nature? Are there any interactions that stick out in your mind, or?
Yes. There's so many, like just the squeals, like the light and excitement, and that whole ew thing. Like when we talk about owl pellets, you look at owl pellets like that. They're so excited, and it's sort of gross, but it's so cool. And I think those are the things that stick in their minds, But one of my things that has stuck out the most is one of my favorite students was probably 8 at the time, and we had an after-school class, and we just were walking, and we were all sort of quiet in the woods, and she just sort of took this deep sigh, and she goes, Heather, she goes, when you're sort of having a bad day and you go outside and everything's okay again. Can you imagine it?
Yeah.
And that's what I find a lot is they kind of come in and they're sort of stressed and they're tired of sitting all day at school, and they just go out there and there's just something that shifts in them, and something about having all their senses engaged, instead of the two-dimensional stuff that the screen gives you, like they're smelling and hearing and sometimes tasting things, and it's a whole nother experience that they really do need for their health. And you've probably read in the book too that there's so many medical consequences about not being outside now.
Oh.
Yeah, with obesity, like you mentioned, but ADD as well, they link to that. Yeah.
Huge. Which I can see.
Yeah.
We talk about a very strong link, and I talk about it a lot with our patients here, is our children who may have this diagnosis. Get them away from the television and the video games, although parents will say they do excellent, and that's a whole other topic. But that stress reduction, anxiety, ADHD, he cites a lot of cases and literature research that talks about that, and you really don't even need that. If I think just anecdotally being out gardening, how much better I feel just doing
hands
something
in the dirt. Right, there's something healing in it, and being outside, and even if we're so busy, just taking 5 minutes and walking out and just listening to the birds or looking at the sky. The sky is like a huge, beautiful, always changing, visual thing. The clouds are always different, and there's so much like beauty that you can take from that. That's sort of nurturing. If you think you don't have time for an hour hike in the woods, there's like just the 5 minutes from your house to your car or to work, you can notice a lot still.
Yeah, just going out, lying down, looking up at the sky, and
Yeah.
watching the clouds.
Yeah.
I used to do that when I was a kid,
Yeah.
and
Right.
more and more kids probably aren't getting that opportunity to even do something as
Right.
quiet. We
Yeah.
were just talking about this before we started, the busyness of everyone's life. So
Yeah.
for us to think about going out into the yard and just laying down and
Yeah.
looking up for 10 minutes, we
Right.
can almost think, who has the time to do that?
Right, but 10 minutes. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can find 10 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny you mention that because just one day in the morning we had some homeschoolers that we were in the woods, and I don't know why they just lay on their backs and were looking up, and then one did it, and then the others followed them, and they were just like, oh my gosh. And the trees look really cool. Yeah, when you're
Yeah.
lying on your back and
Yeah.
looking up, and it's a whole nother angle. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's amazing.
beautiful.
Yeah. And that statistic that really blows my mind, 7 minutes outdoors
Oh,
versus.
it's horrible. I
Yeah.
know.
And
It's awful.
even when we talk about it, I want to ask you if you could maybe give some viewers and our audience maybe some tips when we'll say, okay, Johnny, let's go outside. Let's go outside and
Yeah.
play. And a lot of kids might be at the point where they don't know what to do when they get out
exactly
there.
right.
So how can we, and even adults too, because what I said is, I know all the programs you offer for children, but
Yeah.
this stress reduction, anxiety, being out in nature helps us
It's
all.
so
It's
important. It
not
helps
just
us all, even
children.
adults. Yeah, right.
So, are there ways that we can? I guess I'm talking about children, but even adults. What can we do
Yeah.
what are some tips that you
Yeah.
can give?
Well, so one thing is to definitely build it into your schedule. Like sometimes if there's important things you want to do, if you just write them into your schedule, you'll
Mhm.
find that they get done. And they're saying now that being outdoors and time in nature for children is as important as reading to them at night, like just carving out that time. And just, like you were saying, a lot of kids maybe aren't comfortable and don't know what to do, but just a simple walk, even through your yard or your woods, is good. And what's sort of fun is to learn together, like to sort of, kids have this ingrown curiosity and this wonder that is so contagious. And if they find something like even the simplicity of a spider web, we could spend 10 minutes or half an hour at a spider web just examining it and looking to see how beautiful it is. But there's just simple field guides. Like, can I show some of these things?
Yeah.
Like this Audubon's Field Guide to New England. This is just so helpful because it, instead of a huge guidebook on every plant in North America, for instance, this sort of narrows it down to the mammals, plants, birds, trees, etc., that are most popular in this area. So like I've kind of recommend this to people so that if you're out together and you see a plant that's really interesting, you don't have to be able to teach the child everything you know about it. You can kind of learn together and look it up or look online and just sort of discover things together. And that's sort of fun too, and I find there's maybe a handful of things that are that I run into the most out in the woods, that if you just sort of notice it at first, you can look it up together and sort of take a mental picture of it and then go back and look it up in your field guides. And it's fun, like their excitement and enthusiasm sort of really pulls adults into learning more as well.
Yeah, and you don't have to know everything about what you're seeing. Even just the
Exactly.
exploration is something adults or children can do. And if you're an
Yeah.
adult out in the woods, or do you have to be out in the woods to
No,
enjoy nature?
you can be in your backyard, front yard, you can be in a city park, anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the driveway, just looking at the birds, yeah.
Yeah, because you don't have to be you just lay down and look up at the sky, right?
Exactly, yeah. And when I was doing my naturalist training, they were saying that the name of something is actually the least important thing about it. Like, you kind of can just learn its essence, like, what does it smell like, what is its characteristics, what might it be good for, what have people maybe used it for in the past, indigenous cultures and stuff. And so knowing the names of things doesn't matter as much as just sort of studying it
Looking at it.
together. Yeah, like we're looking at it together.
Yeah. Gardening has done that for me with the
Yes.
kids because actually I should go back with my stepfather, photography, and all his photography with nature, because you really you focus in on the details of things that we miss. We're running around, and so that sort of is kind of inspired gardening, and then having the kids come over and just look at this flower and look at the inside, look at the colors, and they'll ask questions. So even something as simple is that an anthill?
Yeah, and anthill is fascinating. But gardening is nice you mentioned that, because food is, something that we eat every day and need for survival. And so gardening is one great way to get kids involved too, is because it's a connection that they can sort of see in their everyday lives, and getting them into the dirt and just teaching them about that. It's simple, you don't need a lot of space, and that's one good way to get started too.
Yeah,
Getting them
and it's really healing to be out there,
Yeah,
and just
it is.
I think today with such a fast-paced, crazy schedule that
Yeah.
most of us have, to carve out that time to just settle down, because it's you take in so much more too when you stop and just.
It absolutely,
Yeah.
it slows you down. And,
Yeah.
And
I think one of the things and I've kind of learned it as the kids have come to you, is, we'll find a stick or a twig outside, and we can pick that up and find something neat about something's growing off of it.
Exactly. Right,
And
exactly.
I've started to look at things, in a much different way just from that, and the
Good, yeah.
appreciation of the awe that is around us.
Right, and how
And
amazing it is.
It's,
Yeah. And that reminds me too, sometimes we'll just take a foot, like measure out a foot by a foot by a foot of grass, and just get down our hands and knees and look at it. You could spend an hour of the bugs in there, the dirt, the smell of the grass, all the different little flowers in there, clovers. Like, you just walk through the grass every day, but if you just focus on that for even half an hour, like you said, just one stick in that grass can have so many lessons in it. It's fascinating.
So
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about, once we get outdoors, I think one of the big things is kids are now used to being indoors. They're very connected to screens.
Yeah.
Crazy lifestyle. So we overcome those obstacles.
Yes.
And we're outside, and we also have to think about structured play versus non-structured play,
Right,
and the difference
exactly.
that can do for our health, of just having that non-structured engagement with our environment.
Yeah.
But you mentioned it, and it was something I wanted to ask you about, is fear. Where I grew up, it
Mhm.
wasn't as rural as this, but I remember a couple of summers ago, we had a mom and her babies made a den under our shed.
Of what? A bear?
Sorry, foxes.
A fox. Oh.
And
yeah.
the babies were out on our tennis court romping around and playing, and then you think about, you'll hear bear sightings around, and coyotes you'll hear at night,
Yeah.
and ticks.
Yeah.
So
Right.
there's so many things I think that parents also fear,
Right.
and in turn may give that to their kids.
Yeah.
So
And it keeps them.
what's a way to, do you have some things that you think of to maybe, what is it? It's a healthy way of being, aware of what's going on,
Yes.
without being afraid.
Right.
Or,
So there's different things. I find the media definitely can, make it sound worse than it is out there.
Mhm.
And once I was, the Globe did a huge article on, like, scary things in your backyard, and I saw a huge article on all the things that are scary, like snakes and spiders and everything. And stuff like that, I don't think helps to calm people. But what I learned, and I find interesting too, is that when we walk in the woods or in the yard anywhere, and start walking, it's like a pebble is dropped and the ripples go out, and for 1 mile, pretty much everything scatters. So when you're out there, you'll pretty much, never. Like, if there are foxes out there or things that you might think you'd bump into, they pretty much have scattered before you're even anywhere close to them. So some children think that, like bears are just sort of waiting behind trees to jump out and scare them. But, I find it surprising that even grizzlies will, if they hear you coming, their first response is to get away,
Just to move away.
Yeah. And then there's other things you can learn about. Like, there's another Audubon guide, or it's Peterson maybe, called Venomous Plants and Venomous Plants and Poisonous Animals, or like something like that. And it just teaches you everything that is hazardous in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of comforting to know that, because then the other things that you come into will be fine. So ticks, for instance, one thing we recommend is when you are outside, you just come in and take off your clothes by the washer and put them in, and then shower right away, so that before anything can attach to you,
Mhm.
it is washed away in the washer or washed off your body. I think it's sometimes 24 hours for ticks to attach, you know.
Yeah.
And then snakes, even if they hear you coming, their first response is to get away. And yeah, so I think pretty much the fears are, or the dangers out there are over exaggerated, you know, and that you know, you're not likely to. The chances are you're probably going to be fine out there, and it's work, you know.
So the kids that you see in your programs, are they afraid of nature?
Yeah, a lot of them will be afraid of like salamanders.
Oh, okay.
They'll be afraid of, you know, even worms, the earthworms and
Yeah,
stuff, because
yeah.
they're new to them and they're so unknown that they don't know what's going to happen. You know, so we'll talk about how a salamander doesn't have teeth, or they could bite them, or claws they could scratch them, and you know, kind of learn about what it'll feel like on their hand before they touch it, and then when they touch it, you know, they'll squeal. That
Yeah.
it feels so cool, and that it's so so alive. You know, it's something about that. And but yeah, there are a lot of fears now about even getting hurt and falling and getting cut, because they're not taking risks as much these days. You know?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Do you see? I think one of my kids, Nolan. I think I remember this when his first one. He was a little tentative, kind of stood off, and then by the next, maybe even that day when I picked him up, and then every day after, he had a different something in his hand to show, something alive in his hand to show me every time I picked him up.
Yes.
So they overcome that
Yes.
quickly because of their curiosity and
Yeah.
probably just their innate want to connect to these
Yeah,
things.
and there is something innate in us that wants to connect with nature, for sure, you know. But I'll find too that the other kids, if they're all touching and exploring and feeling things, then they're having so much fun that the other kids who might be more hesitant want to join in. And
So what environments with the program do you go to? I know there's several different places that you'll meet.
Correct, yeah. So we'll meet on conservation land that has brooks running through it, and big open meadows which have different animals and that are really interesting. And then we'll meet at like a frog pond that has frogs and turtles and fish and snails and different pond creatures that are interesting. And then just sort of a deeply wooded area of 100 acres. And then some areas sometimes with animal caves or dens, we call them, you know, like just a huge rock area where the rocks have formed so that animals can spend time in them, and it's fun to track there in the winter and see the tracks coming and going and who's been in there, and that's always interesting. And that's pretty much it. So we'll do like the conservation land, streams, frog ponds, and then woods. Yeah.
Yeah, and the age range is younger children.
Yeah, 3.5.
Okay.
And then
And
to
up.
like 16 or 17. And what's nice is those children that started when they were in preschool just have keep staying and have grown with us. So I think this year we have 16-year-olds with us, yeah. And then at some point they'll graduate and be counselors when we have summer camps. Yeah.
Yes, because I think there
Yeah.
were a couple counselors in training last year that my
Yes.
kids attached
Yes,
themselves to.
right.
And
I
they're
love them.
wonderful because they're
Yeah.
great teachers. too.
Yes.
They love sharing with the younger kids.
And they're enthusiastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see older kids. That struck me because I think last year was the first time the kids did a longer day where they got to interact with some older kids.
Yeah.
And you don't see that very
Yeah.
often. Kids
Right.
older, 10, 11, 12, 13, that are still that connected
I
and
know.
fascinated by
I
nature. You
agree.
really don't. And
Yeah,
it must
is
be
sad.
this entire generation of the way things are changing.
Yeah, right, it is. And they're indoors more for sure. Then they have more homework, and they're on their computers, and then they drift off and, you know.
It almost
surf,
seems as
but-
almost more important for those kids. They're so, I find that age range seems to be so stressed
Yeah,
with
just-
workload and school and whatnot.
Yeah, it'd be nice for the stress relief to
Yeah.
have that, yeah.
And you have homeschool programs
Yeah.
as well.
Yes, that are all day. I mean, the same thing, 9 to 2, 9:30 to 2, and we'll just go into the woods and bring lunches and snacks and just spend the whole day out there, and that's really fun because we can get so immersed in topics, and each, they just meet once a month for the full day, and we'll just talk about whatever they want to learn. You know, in September we'll figure out the topics for the year, and this month we were doing wildlife tracking and then bird song and bird calls and everything.
Oh,
And then what else have we done? Anyway, just sort of whatever is interesting to them. Yeah. And usually things that we can find then when we're out on our walks.
What's the difference in, zoos are a big place to go to.
Yeah.
I know there's some natural museums that. What's
Yeah.
the difference between bringing our kids to those versus bringing our kids? I think I know what the difference is, but I like to hear it from you.
Right.
You know, I think certainly those things could be important in having children have some more information, but there's a larger difference in having that ability to actually get in there and
Right, and get into this. Yeah, well, I think, I mean, there's a lot to learn. Like, one thing interesting about zoos is that you can see the animals so up close. I mean, that's the closest you'll get to a lion, probably, or a bear, you know, or a giraffe. I mean, to see the details of the animal and how they walk and how they move is fascinating, you know. But there's also, I don't know if you would use the word sadness, you know, but something like that with them, too. I mean, when I went to a zoo in D.C., there was a rhino, and all day he would just hit his head against the wall, and they had a sign like, why is he hitting his head against the wall, kids? You know, and it was saying, and it said something like he's frustrated with being here, you know, and he had just worn down his horn, and you know, there's like such sadness too, that obviously they're not thriving in such a small space. But you know, being able to see the animals up close is so cool, because you know, like I was saying, they will scatter when we're in the woods, so you won't see them up close unless it's from your window.
Okay.
But the breathing, you know, in the zoo, you're on the concrete paths and walkways as well, and there's something about walking in the dirt that's really
that uneven ground and just getting your feet in there.
Yeah.
And shoes and socks off, and just feeling the ground.
Yes.
And being part of that.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't feel that anymore, you know.
Yeah.
And a lot of kids will say, "We'll get in trouble. You know, my mom or dad will get mad if I'm dirty when I leave here." But part of connecting, you know, is just, it's a hands-on. It's just getting in there, and it's a contact sport, really. You know, you just get dirty and you can everything washes off. I tell them, you know.
Yeah. So, as you're describing just a visit to the zoo, I don't know how many people would experience it that way.
Yeah.
You're so detailed about what you're seeing and their walking and their movement and their because you're used to, I think, connecting that, and I think that's one of the reasons why I try to have the kids, you know, be outside with them, and we try to explore, and I love bringing them to your programs because they take in those details because that's what they're used to. Whereas I wonder if children who have that exposure, who might visit a place like that, will see it in that way. Not that it's wrong or right the way you see it. Everyone sees it. But I wonder if you describe it in such detail. I wonder if someone who's used to being indoors and not being able to use all of their senses, being out, if they might see it in a completely different way and miss some of those details.
Yeah, they might want to show from the animal, you know, like to see them come and eat or do something, you know, expect more in a different way. Yeah.
And I just think about growth and development and being able to access all of those senses when you're young and experiencing them in the right way versus, you know, through a video game or whatnot, is probably immeasurably better for you than the alternative.
Yeah, right, because the video stuff is just seeing and hearing, you know, you're not moving your body, you're not listening, smelling, touching, really, while you're touching the remote. But,
and just to walk through the woods quietly, too. We don't have that opportunity to be quiet.
Yeah.
So I think for adults, which is what I talked about, this is just as important for adults as kids because we don't get that quiet time. We don't allow ourselves to even have it.
Right, it's so restorative.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, we had you know, as I'm learning this, we set up a bird feeder right outside our office window near the adjusting area, and I was so excited because I thought everyone's going to enjoy these birds, and they're going to go to the table, and they're going to see the birds out the window, and the first day came and went, and I wasn't in the office. Jason was in the office, and I said, "So how did it go? How many people saw the birds, and what did they think?" And he said, "No one commented." I'm like, "No one commented?" I would have sat at the window and said, "Look at that bird, look at the colors." And the only one who commented was Moira, our front desk.
Oh, really?
She noticed right away, and she loved watching them. But I said, "Oh, no one." So is it the busyness? Is it the just aren't looking at? I don't know what it is, but
But
it was
it's
kind of
fun.
funny because I was just so excited to hear the feedback, and he said
And
not
not-
one person said anything. So I don't know.
Yay for effort.
Yeah.
Right? And that is a
We'll
good
keep
way
trying.
too to pull kids in, because I have that in my kitchen window as well. And so when the kids are there, their eyes will go to it instantly when the birds land, and that's a good way to see them up close
It is.
without, you know, being outside because they'd scatter if you come.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a great way to pull kids in too, because you can see them. And I love the goldfinches. You can see their colors changing from the
Oh.
dark, kind of dark yellow now to more of the bright yellow as they get into their mating
Yeah.
areas.
Isn't that interesting?
Beautiful.
We
Yeah.
have one in our living area that it's in front of a big picture window, and the kids have a little table and chairs there, so they'll eat their snacks and watch the birds come and go
Oh,
there.
yay,
And
yeah.
it's so incredible because within a week they could identify that's a male cardinal, that's a female cardinal. I mean, they just
That's
would know.
amazing.
Blue
Yeah.
jays, big fat blue
Isn't that
jays.
amazing when they land there?
Yeah, they're huge. Doves. Doves are kind of lazy, but it's really fascinating, and they're naming the birds.
That's wonderful.
Chickadees. So
Yeah, to see them that close too, it makes them want to say, "What is that?" You know, that's so cool, and it's smaller than the other bird that landed there, and you know, it makes their curiosity
Yeah.
kind of develop.
And recognizing the
That's good.
colors. The colors are
Yeah.
incredible.
Aren't they?
And I would
know.
have missed that if I had not started to think this
see
way. I
that,
just feel
yeah.
like, isn't it amazing that nature designed it?
So beautiful.
Those colors.
Right,
you know?
absolutely amazing. Like even the mourning doves, did you see them up close? They have like
Mm.
this blue ring around their eye, like
Mm.
these subtle details that are gorgeous, and all the flecks of color.
Yeah.
Yeah, so pretty.
So I
It's
like that we
nice.
get to experience that.
Yay.
We'll keep trying with the bird feeder in front of our office space. Hope someone.
Right.
So I wanted to talk about some of the things that you brought because
Oh yeah.
you talked a lot about, you know, how important that unstructured time is to be in nature, but there
Yeah.
is some time that you have that's a little more structured.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah,
tell
so
me a
maybe
little
I'll
bit
talk
about.
this first. So these are our nature journals that we use for the homeschool kids, and they decorate themselves, the covers, and each week we talk about it says welcome to your natural world. Each week or month we'll have a certain topic, and like you were saying, when you have the birds so close to you, it's interesting to see their details. So we always start out by sketching things, and you know, some of the kids will say, but I'm not a good artist, you know, but by sketching you learn so much about the details of the animals, you know, and when you see something in nature too, if you just can do a mental picture of it, and then try to go back and sketch it, it's
This person is a good artist.
isn't this great? And she's like a 10-year-old girl.
Wow.
But it helps you remember the animal more too than just looking at the picture or the animal quickly.
Mhm.
Like these are some of her sketches. A titmouse. We'll always start by sketching them, and they spend a lot of time on the details, which is really wonderful. And look
And
at this.
Adults
sparrow.
can do this too if they took you know, their own little journal.
Absolutely.
And
Yes,
just,
exactly. Yes, and I'll show you over here. I have some other ones that I just make. You just, you know, cut paper in half and printer paper in half and then staple it together. And then we have a journal for everything we're talking about. So this was a bug expedition we went on. So just keeping a place like this, these were just some of our local bugs, ladybugs, praying mantises, fireflies. And then we just go out and try to find them or sketch them from pictures. But that, yeah, even adults doing that, you could have more time to just focus on the details. And, you know, this one was empty, of course. But sketching is a great way to learn things. And then we'll just learn basic features, like when we learn about birds, we'll study their beaks because it teaches a lot about what they eat and what their diet is like. And we'll learn their songs because when we're outside hearing that, you know, you might pick up on it.
Are the kids able to pick up on different songs? I mean, we have. You
Yes.
can. It's an orchestra when you walk out of this building.
I bet.
So
Yeah. So
and
being
they can
able to
pick up on the
isolate.
different
Yeah.
songs.
And
Isn't that
actually,
amazing?
that's funny you should mention that, because this too was, so this book I mentioned, the Audubon's Common Guide to New England, will have just some of our basic plants, animals, and birds. So that's a good way to just sort of get started learning about the natural world. But there's a lot of books too about just common birds and their songs, and this is one of my favorites by Lang Elliott. And in the back he has a CD, but it's in our kitchen CD player right now. But just, you know, learning that the chickadee, tufted titmouse, just maybe our top 10 common birds, and hearing their sounds. When you go out, you can isolate those in the whole symphony of sound.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's a great way to sort of start engaging your hearing
Your
when you're
hearing
outside.
senses, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. There was a book I found at the library. It was 365 activities to do without the television.
Nice.
And I wanted it for our office library. And one of them is going out and sitting quietly, and
Excellent.
then we, for whatever it was, 5-10 minutes, and then go around and talk about what you heard.
Yay! Excellent.
So
yes.
that was neat.
And we'll do something like that. Called a sound map, where you'll sit quietly and put a dot in the center of your paper that's you, and then just draw all the things around you. Like, oh, I hear cars here, and oh, there's a plane there. Like you'll hear the human sounds first sometimes, and then they'll hear like a rustling over here, and the more time you spend, the more you hear.
Maybe drown out the human sounds
First.
and hear more of the nature sounds
Yeah,
after
right.
a while. I
Yeah,
wonder.
yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that neat?
And there's a lot to be said for sitting quietly in the woods.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
even 10 minutes. Yeah, you just notice more, and once you're still, things start to come out. The things that have scattered will come out and start going about their business again.
Yeah.
And you can see things like the most extreme story I heard is someone who sat quietly, and a raccoon, just after an hour and a half, a raccoon just came and just used him and crawled and went up to the tree above him because he was so
Wow.
still and
Yeah.
so blended in with the
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Isn't that
the best? I would love that experience.
Wow.
Yeah.
What are some animals that, what are some things that you've come in contact with in your programs that really stick out with you? Have you seen?
So what is fascinating too is I find mostly when we go off the beaten track is when you find the coolest things too. Like I'll try to be focused. Like we'll try to learn about, we'll be going off on, like on a destination from this point to that point, but there'll be tracks maybe in the snow leading off here, and the kids will say, let's go follow tracks, and it's so hard because you want to just stay and do your lesson that you have planned, but when you go off that path is when we found the coolest things, like in the snow, like a bobcat once had attacked this opossum and then like dug it all up and buried it so you could see the claw marks in the pile of snow.
Wow.
And so going by, you wouldn't have noticed it unless you could see his tracks sitting up to it, and then the scratch marks in the snow. And we kind of dug down, and there was an opossum in there that he had eaten and then stashed for later.
For later.
But that was one of our favorites. Yeah.
So how did the kids react when they saw that?
It's so cool because there's the whole gamut of expression. Like some of them, one kid said, "Oh, I just threw up a little in my mouth," and other kids are like, "That's so gross," and then girls will like, it varies by gender, but some will just cover their faces, and some just want to, can we dig more? Like they just want to go more, they want to touch things.
Yeah.
And then we go back and we look at a full picture of an opossum and see what he looked like before that attack. But there's such a range, a lot of sadness about animals, and then we learn about the cycle of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is important.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. So we make the journals, and then these are kind of cool things that we do on our walks. We have these little things that I call bug boxes, and we just take them out with us, and there's a magnifier on top and then breathing holes, and it so it keeps them sort of mindful. It's always in their hand, and they're looking for a cool little plant to find, or an acorn, or a little frog, or a salamander, something that they can explore. And if they don't want to touch it, they could just pick it up with the bug box and then look in, And at the dollar store, they sell, ones like these that kind of break easier, but those are a good thing to have around to sort of get kids to go outside. And those have a neck, a string that you can wear around your neck so your hands are free. That's kind of cool too.
Yeah. So I know this because my children said, and Mom, it has holes in it so the animals can breathe. And I said, well, I'm sure, because what you do in the programs is you collect these things, whatever they might find.
Yes.
And I've seen them. Sometimes there's a whole environment in there.
Right, yeah.
And it can be moss or, it's really interesting. And then you release it back.
So then we bring them back to our table and we sketch them in our journals that we found. So they'll draw little salamanders or beautiful plants or cool acorns and things, and then we'll go back in the woods, and release them.
Yes, which is really neat.
Otherwise, they won't be happy. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And then we make sometimes these treasure boxes. I don't know if you guys have done these, but we just take a simple box and decorate it with the animal pictures, and then when they're on their walks, they can bring things that aren't alive home, like feathers or cool acorns or rocks and things, because you know, sometimes if my own children, I'll go into their rooms and on the bookcase will be, you know, a big pile of rocks and things that I just think, you know, it's easy to just want to chuck them, but they're such treasures to the kids, you know. So we make boxes where they can collect their most prized possessions that they find outside.
Isn't that neat? Yeah.
And then, you know, we made these this week, little animal tracks. We make casts of, we start with this rubber mold and then pour plaster of Paris into it and make molds of some of the mammals that we find in the woods in Massachusetts. This one's the red fox.
And this is the raccoon.
The raccoon.
And my kids love these. I was telling you, they're by their beds.
I love
that. And they love looking at it.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting because when I picked up the boy, was it the boys, and or maybe their friend too? I think they actually had raccoon ones, and they were describing it to me. Well, mine is more spread out. Mine's a little closer, and they were really
like
telling me the details of it.
Oh, I love that.
Which was kind of neat to hear them talk like that.
That is so cool.
Yeah, they loved these.
Did they? Oh, good.
Gosh,
I'm so
yeah,
glad.
this was a hit.
So 95% were just outside exploring, but I sometimes try to have something to bring home because it kind of brings home what we're talking about to them. And these are one of my favorites.
Yeah,
the things.
yeah. So this is from your winter tracking class. So you don't have to only be out in nature in the summertime or the springtime or the fall.
All year.
It's nice to be out then. Some people enjoy the cold weather and will go. But the winter tracking is a neat class because they can go out and see these things in the snow
firsthand. Yeah, and that does make winter more enjoyable. Is going out and after fresh snow as well, seeing what's traveled through the woods at that time. Because like we were saying too, we don't see all the animals in our woods, you know, when we're out there. So in the tracks of the next morning, show us such a huge abundance of activity that happened the night before.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
So this is really great.
Cool.
And now, what's
then these are the owl
this?
pellets. So this is sort of interesting that, you know, a lot of kids are fascinated by owl pellets, and the more you look for them, just at the base of a tree, you'll just find a pellet. You know, it blends so much in with the earth and the leaves and the dirt and everything that you don't notice them. And then after a while, when the rain hits them, they dissolve into nothingness, really. But this is an owl pellet, which a lot of people might already know is when the owl digests its food, it eats all it absorbs, it swallows the animal whole and then spits up the undigestible parts like the fur and the bones and the jaws and beaks and talon, you know, little claws and stuff. So this is
one of your classes, actually.
Yeah, we do all pellet classes.
Yeah,
and they're so cool. And these are just at the base of big trees in the woods a lot.
Base
and
of big
easy
trees.
To find, yeah.
Because that's where the owls are sitting.
Yeah, so they sit. Yeah, exactly.
I hear an owl. We have an owl back there. I hear every single night, and I wait to hear him or her. So
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can probably have pellets out there.
Yeah. We'll have to look.
And then because if you dissect these, you can buy them already sanitized and they're already cleaned, but also you can just wash your hands when you're done. If you open it up, you can find sometimes a full skeleton of what they ate, like a full vole or mole or whatever. And this is the biggest skull we ever found in one of them. So the owl,
look at the teeth.
I know, the owl digested it and
so
then
what was
spread
that?
it back up.
Do you know?
So this one, I'm guessing was a shrew.
Shrew.
From the big teeth, and then the teeth down there fell out. Yeah.
What's a shrew? Is that like
so
a mouse?
So it's like a
type
mouse,
of
but
thing?
it's longer. I mean, it's smaller. It would fit like this size in your hand. And he's got a snout, like a pointed snout.
Yeah.
And his eyes are really small
Oh,
because he
wow.
spends most of his life underground.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
they're so cool.
Interesting. Except for that one time where he
Came up and right,
and
that was the end of that
Isn't
story.
That fascinating?
Yeah. But there's a lot of apps on your phone that you can use, as well as I guess I don't have it here. As well as Mass Audubon makes thank you. You know, a cool owl caller that'll show you all the different owl calls, so that when you hear them, you can identify them, and it's kind of fun. And you could even take it out and play an owl call that you know you have in your woods, and then sometimes the owl will respond to you.
Yeah.
That's a cool way to sort of talk back and forth with them.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, we do that on owl hikes. I
Do
love
you?
that.
Yeah. So, okay,
That's cool.
hopefully
Keep
all
that
of
in
my
mind.
neighbors are watching this, so when you see me out in the backyard, you'll know what I'm
Howling.
doing, right? So, the different types of programs that you have are the homeschooling programs, which are throughout the year, but I also know, and you have your summer programs,
Yeah.
your wildlife tracking and owl programs. I mean, there's so many different types of programs you've devised, but I also know you
Yeah.
do library visits, you do school
Correct.
visits.
Yes, right, a lot. And scout programs and birthday parties. We have
And
like,
birthday parties, yes, yeah.
So we
So-
do a lot.
And they get to have an opportunity to go on a nature exploration and do an activity even with something like a birthday party or
Exactly, yes. The birthday party, an hour will be outside in the woods, and then the other hour will be doing a craft, and then just talking and doing cake and things like that as well.
So is it turned out to be what your vision was of it?
Yeah, so I wanted kids to be outside, and
Yeah.
I got that, and I wanted more kids engaged in nature, and I wanted them to find special spots in the woods that they fall in love with, and the kids that return to camp each year will say, we want to go to Blueberry Island, or we want to go to
Blueberry
Blueberry
Island. I heard
Island.
about Blueberry
Or this
Island,
winter we're doing Icicle Rock, like this big rock where all the icicles fall from. But you know, it's like the falling in love with places like that. Like that's what they kind of look back on when they're older, and so that's been gone really well. And I wanted, just to take them away from all their indoor technology and stuff. But I do hear a lot of every week that this reminds them of a video game. Like I don't even know
So
what games they
fascinating.
are that they're
And
playing.
my kids don't have video games, so I
Good,
wouldn't
that's
even
awesome.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's things where you walk and there's big trees, or I don't even know either.
Yeah,
It's
how could a man? I guess they're so
I
lifelike.
know.
now, but,
Yeah.
I mean,
right, but I'm like, no, this came first. The video game came after this.
yeah. Oh my gosh.
So
Isn't that incredible?
it is indeed. Yeah.
How do you answer that?
I know. I just sigh and then I go, well, actually, this was here first, or what reminds you of it, and then we'll look closely at the plants and just try to derail
Yeah.
conversation and
Yeah. Oh my
talk about
gosh.
what we're learning about. Yeah.
Well, I love this. I love your programs and I
Thank
love what
you.
you're doing, and
Thank you.
I get to see it firsthand with my kids and how much they enjoy it, and I think I know when I truly love something is when you have taught me so much, and you haven't even meant to, but
Oh.
I've taken so much of what you've done with the kids and what they've brought back and how you engage with them, and just even when I drop them off and pick them up, and how you're so excited about showing them these different things, and it's
Yeah.
really, I've internalized it and tried to kind of recreate some of those things
Thank you.
at
That's
home too.
great.
So it's been a learning process for me
Good.
as well,
Oh,
and
thank you.
I just think more kids need this opportunity just to be engaged with nature, and you're such a great, starting point to do that if
Yeah.
it's adults or children who haven't really had that opportunity to engage in nature, and I think it's really important for overall health and well-being, and just
Absolutely.
having children
Yeah.
be able to use their own imaginations and
And build confidence. It builds so much confidence. And they say you do better in school the more time you're outside,
I
which is
believe-
interesting. Yeah.
I believe it.
That they
yeah.
score better.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
believe that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just seeing in how I feel after a simple gardening task, I can imagine what it does for adults and children who take the time on a regular basis to be out there. So,
Yeah.
I wanted to just end with a quote that actually came off of your website, which is one of my favorite quotes ever.
Oh.
You were alluding to it a second ago, but it says, tell me how to say this, Baba Diome.
Oh, right. Yes. Yes.
In
right.
the end, we will conserve only what we love, we will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught. And I love that
Isn't
quote.
that good?
I think that really encompasses this.
Right.
And I'm really grateful that you were able to come on the show.
Thank you, Dr. Kate.
Now, if viewers want to get in touch with you, if they want to learn more about Hands on Nature, this is a great, I love that picture. What are they doing there?
So this was at the frog pond, and we had just caught some frogs with this net, and it was time, they just sketched them in their journals as well, and it was time to release them, so they actually were lining up the frogs, and they were going to have like a frog jumping contest, and they were going to jump back into the water, and the kids love that. And fascinatingly enough, if you face them towards the water, they will kind of go in a straight line, and some
race?
go really fast. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's so
It's
neat.
so fun.
So
yeah.
I see the website, but if you can tell viewers how can they learn more about Hands on
Yeah.
Nature? How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so definitely our website, handsonnature.org, and then our email address is the same, handsonnature@gmail.com.
Okay.
And that's probably the best way.
Great, and
Yeah.
it's a great website, very informative, so it's a
Thank
great
you.
resource for people to start. So once again, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you
This
for
was
having me.
fascinating.
Thanks for
Um,
inviting me.
Thank you again for all of this too, and bringing all of this. I really enjoyed all this, and I want to keep some of these
Please do,
too for
yes.
our patients. Yes. So, well, you've been watching Holistic Health with Dr. Kate. We're dedicated to informing and inspiring you to make healthy and whole choices for your family. Thank you for watching.